Are we live? We don't look live. Ooh, I'm looking at the wrong place. Okay, maybe we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of All Access. And we are going to talk about a lot of things today, as usual, because there's been a lot of exciting developments in the Avalanche universe. One thing I don't want to do too much of today, or any of today, is talk about the insanity, the fraud, the craziness that we lived through. It's time to go past it. It's time not to get pulled into the shenanigans, the one letter at a time tweets, the cryptic messages. It's all going to end in the same way. It's going to end with the guy who perpetrated the entire scheme. It's a very complicated scheme. It involves like multiple different tricks that he employed. But it's all going to cultivate in, if only you had let me run it through to completion, I would have made everybody whole. That's what he's going to say. So I want to have nothing to do with it. I blocked Sam on social media. Don't want to see his craziness. Lord knows I don't want to see pictures of the polycule. I don't want to see the pool parties. It's just, there's so much good stuff done by great people. And I just want to focus on that stuff in general, in my life and in everything going forward. I also suggested that everybody sort of reach out and talk to your friends and so forth. I've been doing that myself. I've been practicing it, hung out with some really wonderful people this last week. Some of them are in the Avalanche community. Some of them are crypto OGs. So it's been wonderful. If you're listening and you were at any of the meetings that we had recently in the last week, thank you for coming by. It's been a great source of support. And I am much more convinced now than ever that we're on to something amazing with crypto. So I'm feeling great. I hope you are feeling great as well. It's a wonderful Friday afternoon in New York City here. And let me jump into some of the good news that's been happening around in the Avalanche ecosystem. The big news yesterday was that LayerZero is going to be using BTC.b as its core asset for DeFi. So what's BTC.b? We've discussed this in previous episodes, but it's a one-to-one wrapped Bitcoin asset. So what does that mean? If you have a Bitcoin and it's on the Bitcoin network, you can do Bitcoin things with it on the Bitcoin network, limited by what that network provides to you. When you move it, when you bridge it to the Avalanche system, it turns into BTC.b. The .b suffix there indicates that it originated in the Bitcoin network and that the underlying asset is BTC. And now you can do a whole slew of things on Avalanche to that asset. The same key is used in both Bitcoin and Avalanche using some cute trickery. And so the same key will move the same asset on the Avalanche chain. So this allows you to suddenly take your Bitcoin, and instead of using the Bitcoin network, now you can use the Avalanche network, where you have access to much faster finality. You write your transaction, it's executed, it's final in a second. So in a very slow eye blink, that thing has moved and it's been finalized in exactly the same finalization mechanism. Not exactly. They're using a very different consensus mechanism, but it's as final as it would be if you had used, well, in any case, let's not get into the details, but it's as final as it would be after an hour of confirmations on the Bitcoin network. So what can you do? Well, with LayerZero adopting BTC.b, now BTC.b goes multi-chain. It's going to be available to you on chains other than Avalanche. So you can transfer it from Avalanche to Ethereum, to any of the other chains. You can go transact with it there. You can go do yield opportunities on other chains where the underlying asset is this particular one. This is supremely exciting. This means that there is an asset here that's going to be accessible to you no matter which chain you might want to choose. So let's see. One of the key features, of course, of BTC.b is that there isn't a centralized custodian. So normally when people go through a wrapping process, they go through a special kind of an entity, a custodian. They send their Bitcoins to the custodian. The custodian is powered by humans who then issue new coins. By using this trick that I mentioned, this crypto trick, and utilizing the same exact address, we can actually create that wrapping independently. Users can do that all by themselves without having to need the services, the effort of another entity, of another set of humans who are wrapping this asset. They don't need an explicit set of trust relations with a set of humans to get this wrapped asset. So you can freely do this anytime you want. If you've got some BTC, you install the core wallet, and then using the core wallet, you can natively hold the asset, BTC. You can convert it to BTC.b, and then once it's in BTC.b form, you get exposure to Avalanche DeFi. And if you go over LayerZero, suddenly it goes into all sorts of other locations. I think that's what these slides are going to discuss. So once it becomes this token on the Avalanche C chain, then it can actually go to all sorts of other places. This is far better than using Ethereum's WBTC. Some of you are using it. That's a decent wrapped asset. WBTC, the finalization time, transaction time on Ethereum is going to take about 5 minutes. So BTC.b has 1 second finality on the Avalanche network. It's decentralized. So in the case of WBTC, so there are some number of DAO members who are doing this wrapping, and there's a whole hassle, very, very hassle-prone process. In contrast, with BTC.b, anyone can participate in the minting, and you can use various DeFi services within the Avalanche ecosystem, and with LayerZero, you can take it to other locations. Okay, so there's some cool visuals of this thing happening. It's so easy to use. I really suggest you try it. Installing core is easy. Once you have core, bridging is really easy. You're going to end up spending at least an hour on the Bitcoin side. I found that the Bitcoin users are actually very tolerant of latencies, and so they're just used to them. They do a transaction, they wait an hour, they get their tea. They're very, very chill people. They don't interact with the chains all that often. They're usually holders. So, and they're very accustomed to very slow processes. So it's kind of like people who use giant minivans or something like that. And once you get to Avalanche, it's kind of like, when I was in grad school, I used to ride a motorcycle. And once you get on a motorcycle, your entire notion of speed changes, right? It's like you're like, wherever you want to go, you end up gassing it to get to wherever you want to. And then when you get back into a car, then it feels incredibly sluggish. So try it out. Things are so fast on the Avalanche chain. It'll be hard to go back. You'll get used to instantaneous reactions. Like you do a transaction, you submit, and it's finalized. It's not an experience you can have anywhere else. So it's really cool, and I think you'll enjoy it. There is about $85 million worth of bridged BTC.b on Avalanche so far. I think that's good. It should be even larger. Some more has come in and goes back. You can also always unwrap your BTC. You don't like what you see, you want to go back, you could do it immediately without any intervention. So it's all in there, supported by this whole technology that has been built. So let's see. And then there's this. This is a very quick video. Let's see.
Push your Bitcoin to work on DApps like Ava by sending Bitcoin to Core and converting it to BTC.b using the bridge. Step 1 is to download Core from the Google Chrome store and create a wallet. The next step is to open Core, switch to the Bitcoin network, and copy your Bitcoin receive address. Step 2 is to send your Bitcoin from wherever it is currently stored. For this example, I am sending Bitcoin out of my Trust wallet. So I'm going to navigate to wherever my Bitcoin is held. Send. Step 3, once the Bitcoin has been received, bridge it from the Bitcoin network to the Avalanche C chain in the Core extension. Click the plus icon, choose bridge, select your amount, and initiate the transfer. Step 4, when the bridge transaction is complete, your BTC has moved from the Bitcoin network to the Avalanche network, and your BTC.b is ready to use on Ava. If you navigate to your assets page, change to the C chain, you'll see your BTC.b there. Step 5, navigate to app.ave.com, change the network to Avalanche, connect your wallet, click browser wallet, and the core extension will want to connect to the site. Click approve. And once your wallet is connected, it will display the assets that you can supply. So here you can provide BTC.b, click supply, select the max amount, supply BTC.b, approve that transaction. Once you've supplied your BTC.b, you can then borrow against it. For this example, you can borrow USDC by simply clicking borrow USDC, click approve. In just 5 simple steps, you can use your BTC.b as collateral in Aave to open up a whole new world of possibilities, only available on Avalanche.
So that was a case of someone taking their Bitcoin and then borrowing against it, using that Bitcoin as collateral. And this might be a good idea if you have a need to take out some cash and you don't want to sell your coins, you want to borrow against them. So let's see. Let's move on from here.
Put your Bitcoin to work
No,
on
no,
DFs.
no. Stop. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, other new events in the Avalanche universe. The Trader Joe liquidity book just got unveiled. This is something kind of similar to Uniswap version 3. It allows you to supply liquidity in a band. So what does that mean? Let's talk about this. You guys all know about Uniswap. You guys all know about Trader Joe. These are essentially open, decentralized exchanges. They're marketplaces for people to trade crypto assets. And what they do is they always take the other side of every trade. And now to do that, you have to come up with a price. And they come up with a price using well, at least the very first versions of these things, use the very simple-minded process. So they have this X times Y equals K kind of a formula. It's a linear formula. There is some amount of asset X. There's some amount of asset Y. You multiply these two things and you get a constant. They try to maintain the constant. So if somebody wants to dump a lot of the asset X, then the price offered for asset X will end up, if they're selling asset X, then the price offered for it should go down because you're trying to maintain this equality. Because they're taking Y out and they're adding X, the price of X must drop. And vice versa, if they're trying to buy the X out, well, then they should constantly pay more and more of a price. So that's kind of nice. What does that mean? That means that every time you want a counterparty, it's there. It's a smart contract that holds this liquidity in it of assets, a pair of assets. And that liquidity is put to use whenever somebody wants to do a sale or a buy action. So that's nice. Except when you're using the first generation of these protocols, or even the second generation of these protocols, Uniswap v2, you end up distributing liquidity in an inefficient manner. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a set of prices that X could have, right? It could have 0, it could have infinity, and it could have every number in between. Same for Y. Now, actually, it's right. So now you've got these two things. Of course, depending on how much Y you have, the max price for X is capped at that value. So you've got this range. Your liquidity of Y for X or X for Y is distributed evenly across that range, and that's okay. And that's sort of what was happening with Trader Joe until recently. I know there are many users of Trader Joe. That's what Uniswap version 2 was doing. The problem, though, is that you get a lot of slippage because the liquidity is not concentrated. So if somebody is buying and selling, even a small buy or sell will actually move the price quite substantially, depending, of course, on how much money is in the other side of the pair. So with Trader Joe Liquidity Book, what they ended up doing was actually a couple of different things, but one of the key things that they added are these bins. So the liquidity providers, the people who are putting money into Trader Joe to get some passive income, they are the ones who put the coins into a certain bin, into a certain price range, so that the trades happen around that price range. And the liquidity is used in a concentrated fashion in that bin. So this means that when somebody's doing a big buy or sell, as long as they're not exhausting all the money in the bin, they are not going to cause as much slippage as they would if one were to use X times Y equals K, that equation. So there's a cool technical trick that they did, and it's kind of nice. It's in fact more than kind of nice. It's incredibly nice, because if you're a user of these things, then slippage is minimized for you. The other thing that they added is they added the ability to change the spread and increase the fees during times of high volatility. So normally with AMMs, you are subject to what's known as impermanent loss. And those of you who know finance, of course, will know that there is no such thing. It's like counter to the name. That loss is very permanent, right? If you're an LP in Uniswap or Trader Joe, your coins are subject to erosion as the price does crab action, as it does some sideways action. So with Uniswap version 3, that's mitigated, because if there is sideways action, there's high volatility within a range, it slowly opens up the spread. And as the spread opens up, it dampens that action, and it starts gaining more fees for the liquidity providers while bleeding less in impermanent loss. So a bunch of cool tricks that went into it. Of course, I have no affinity with or connection to Trader Joe, other than they, of course, happen to be one of the big applications on top of the Avalanche platform. So I looked into it independently. I happen to like what they did, but I didn't look into their security. They've been through some audits, is what they publicly said. But so there's some cool stuff going on there. It's definitely worth a look. Always do your own research, of course, before you use these platforms. So I'm not vouching for the security of any smart contract. We can never be sure about those things. That's all for Trader Joe folks to do. But as an external onlooker to this, it's so wonderful to see some this kind of innovation in the Avalanche space. This is literally the coolest AMM ever, and these folks are doing all of their development and building on top of our platform, sharing all of the sort of the structure that we provided to them, and providing to everybody else a new DeFi Lego for us to use. So it's really cool stuff. Okay, finally, my voice today is even worse than normal. It's not coming back, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. But my final topic today is that we're hiring. So it's a world of announcements where people are saying, "Hey, I'm going to fire half my company, I'm going to fire 10%, etc., etc." In such a universe, we are expanding rapidly. We will be hiring even more people. I think on the order of a few dozen more to be hired. I am personally very much looking for a head of community to work with, to help guide our community managers, our community in general, to help create an even nicer, even better, even more positive and happier space than the one we have. I think the one we have is by far the sweetest set of people I've hung out with, and I feel this way every time I go to one of our events. So I felt this way in Barcelona, felt this way in Berkeley when we had our hackathon there recently, and every other time in between. So it's just wonderful to be in this community, and we can make it hopefully even better and even more organized. I would like to shed off some of my load in organizing some of these things with this head of community person. I'm very much looking forward to it. We're looking very much for somebody who's happy, positive, and who has great organizational skills for keeping our community well fed with events, with exciting happenings, with whatever it is that at the moment our community needs support and just excitement in general. I'm looking for marketing people as well, and for directors of communications. So if you're interested, avalabs.org/careers has a list of positions as well as the requirements for these positions. All of these can be remote, and maybe the director of communications should really be in New York. I would like to work very closely with them, but the others can be remote, and there are many other positions as well, and those certainly can be remote as well. So take a look, please, if you're interested. Would love to work with people who fit the bill. Okay, let's take some questions. Let's drink some tea to get our voice back, and let's see what our community is talking about today. Okay, I have to scroll back. All right. What sports do I watch? What are my favorite teams and players? Oh God. So I'd love to answer this, but if I do, I'm afraid I'll come under, if I say I love Barcelona, which I do, and I have to be honest about it. I do love Barcelona. Then I just lost half of Spain. So my friends in Madrid, I still love you too. And one of those derby matches between the two is always a fun thing to watch. But I can't help it. I am partial towards Barcelona. Yeah, so I like soccer, and I also what do I do? That's the main thing. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. That's what I watch really. I watch a lot of restoration videos, and a lot of people fixing stuff. I watch a lot of that, and I don't know why, but I find it incredibly soothing. So not so much sports, but really geeky stuff. Watch a bunch of videos about building electronic items. You might be hearing a click every now and then. I just have my Geiger counter here, and I've been curious. Here, I'll disconnect it so it's not clicking. It must have been clicking the whole time. I became accustomed to it, but you might not be. That's the kind of stuff I do, and at least these days. Oh, and I've been building some IoT devices, and so maybe I'll share some of that with you guys. It's a fun space, and you can imagine what kind of communication protocol they use, and what kind of a messaging bus they use. And here I'll say it. Obviously, they're using an Avalanche subnet, and it's a little too early to share anything else about them because I don't want you guys hacking my heating control system in the apartment. So, but I'll share some of the code with you and some of the hardware designs when the time is right. Okay, Elon Musk. Yes, it's the blue check policy has allowed everybody to pretend to be everybody else that they want to be. You've been watching my Twitter since 2016. Fantastic. That's great too. Did you troll me, Jane, in that time period? I don't know. What did I do in grad school to do well in the academic job market? How did I stand out from the many other smart applicants? What's my advice to grad students? This is a great question. What did I do in grad school? I built an operating system, and then it was a very, very well regarded system, squarely on top of the biggest topic at the time. So that's my first advice to grad students: don't work on a niche topic. Okay. So Richard Feynman also says the same thing in his books. It's very straightforward. In any given area at any one time, there are only so many open questions, right? In physics, there are a couple of questions that everybody is pondering right now. In quantum physics, slightly different set of questions. Again, just a very small set at any given moment in time. In computer science, well, it's a big field. Underneath it, in my area, in computer systems, when I was in grad school, the big discussion was, how do you build open, extensible systems? How do you build something like an operating system where what the OS does is not baked into it by the people who wrote it, but could be customized by others? And it's harder than you might imagine because it needs to happen safely. You can't just allow anybody to inject a kernel module, because then they would break the kernel and nobody would know what happened. And when they call the support hotline, it'd be like, what are you running? They would say something like, well, I injected some code into the kernel and then it broke. So clearly that's not an acceptable starting point. So then we started discussing this whole issue of how do you build system services that could be extended at runtime by others, by untrusted third parties. That's what I worked on. And I worked on a system called Spin. I wrote most of the core operating system in Spin. And let's see. So it was kind of interesting. Let's also note that the topic I worked on back in the 90s is exactly the same thing that a blockchain offers. It's an underlying platform into which anyone can extend, can inject extensions. And those extensions must execute with safety and integrity and other properties. So in any case, I did have this arc that really led me to the square middle of blockchains and really did help me out. And I just kind of got lucky in some ways, but in many others, it was my core inherent curiosity was centered around topics related to building systems of this kind: extensible systems, safe systems, fast systems, and systems that provide strong guarantees. And so I was always interested in those. I went to grad school to learn more about them, and it's no wonder, it's no accident that I ended up in blockchains. And but there are meta lessons in what actually worked for me and what might work for other grad students. I worked with abandon. I worked insanely long hours. Now looking back, I realize how insanely long they were. So like 14-hour days, six days a week, no problem. We would do that. Like that's like normal, table stakes. 12-hour days for sure. That was my regular day. But 14 hours, that was not at all unusual for years on end. So I worked really hard. That really helped. I worked within a very good team. That really helped. And I worked on problems that were relevant in that zeitgeist. In the 90s, people were working on extensible operating systems, and we were one of the two leading efforts, the two leading intellectual approaches to the problem. So those all helped. And so to other grad students, I would say the same thing. Nobody wants to hear this. Everybody wants to hear about work-life balance and so on. But to really succeed at something, you have to put in enormous amounts of time. And the earlier you do it, the better. So that's, I think, a good starting point. Work really hard on a problem that you are very, very passionate about. If you're not passionate about your problem, then you should not be in grad school. Grad school is not for everyone. And it's not a holding place. It's not a place where you can do a holding pattern. If you're not really fully immersed in it, you're not going to get much mileage out of it. So if it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing for you, get out. That's another big advice. And the earlier you get out, the better, I think. So those are suggestions I have. Let's open this up so looks a bit better. So those are some starting points. And of course, I was following my area very, very closely. You have to be in command of your area, everything that's happening, all of the exciting things that people are building, even in sub areas that are not your own. You'll end up becoming the world's expert on one tiny topic in grad school. You should be at the end. But you should have some curiosity that spans all of the adjoining areas and a little bit more for you to succeed. I think that has really helped me out incredibly in my career. I was always interested in finance, for example. I was attending talks all across the campus in adjoining areas, in very different areas too. So finance, I mentioned. So that has helped me. When I was a professor at Cornell, I took courses. So it was great. And I highly suggest that you maintain and nourish that inherent curiosity that we all have, that we're all born with. And at some point, the educational system sucks it out of us, right? And if you made it to grad school without losing all of it, then you have to actively cultivate it again. And you have to create that childlike wonder about what's going on, in systems, what's going on in programming languages, what's going on in finance, etc. And that really helped me in this multidisciplinary area of blockchains. That's my story. There are many other ways to succeed. And I'm sure there are people who actually take it easy in grad school, don't have to work hard, and they just find a very good problem and a very insightful solution, and they just turn that into a big ongoing, a big impactful result. So that is also another approach. My line of work requires effort. It always required building things that worked. And so it doesn't require the same element of luck as the other approach, but it does require a far harder bar of commitment. So I had to put in many cycles, many late nights writing code in the lab alone, etc. And it worked really well for me. So much more to say. If you guys have questions, I can have a podcast just based on academic careers at some point. Let's see. What blogs, websites, news sources, books do I read regularly? That's just too many. Yeah, that's just too many. How about I don't handle this right now, because I'm not very good at remembering stuff and making lists of this kind on the fly. Every time I make them, I leave out something really important. And so let me think about that question and come back to you. and we'll do it next week maybe. There's so much that I follow, that I try to follow. Yeah, that's it's just, you just kind of have to. Twitter and Telegram. Yeah, Twitter. I do follow Twitter. Telegram less so. I have a presence on a bunch of platforms, and I just can't follow I can't even respond to the incoming message stream. So if you're messaging me, sometimes people get upset. I apologize in advance. There's no way I can get to every incoming response. I would love to, but I just don't have the time. What's next for Avalanche? There's a lot that's coming for Avalanche. So I think this week we talked about BTC.b. Last week we talked about various different subnet and gaming installations. There is so much more coming up, and as they become public, I'll let you know, of course, and we'll discuss here what the implications are. How often do I watch movies? Once a week or so. Favorite movies of all time? Dr. Strangelove comes to mind. The Big Lebowski comes to mind. So those two I quote a lot. I don't know, there's a whole bunch more. Recently I've been on a binge of what is it, House of Cards or something, the Game of Thrones, the thing that's the follow-on to the Game of Thrones. Do not reveal anything. If you spoil what happened in episode 10 in your question over here, I will kill you. We will ban you for all time. No, we won't. But please don't spoil it. I haven't seen the last episode, but I do watch that series. Check my email. Oh, Kit Sturgeon. Yes. It's an insanely busy week. I am way behind on my email. So if you sent me mail, I guess you get to stalk me here and tell me to read it. Yes, my apologies for not getting on top of it. I wonder how reliable staking AVAX is. What percentage of delegations receive a staking reward? That's a good question. I wonder, Chris. So it depends on who you delegate it to, and you should do your homework. You shouldn't be delegating to some random idiot who doesn't know how to maintain a machine, whose staker node is going to go down, in which case your delegation does not get a reward. So I would expect that it's actually incredibly high percentage, like over 90 something, but I would really want it to be 5 nines or something. The network has to be 5 nines or better available, and if that's the case, you can make a network that's 99.999% available out of individual components that each of whom fail far more often, which is what we do, which is what the protocol does. So your question is, well, how often do validators fail? How often do delegations fail? And I don't know the answer to that. We have a data platform group within Ava Labs. I will ask them, and this is the kind of thing that we should collate and present somewhere. I would also ask the Ava Scan guys. I think that's an entirely different effort. And they also collect a lot of data from the network level, and they too would have some insights. So I'll also reflect this question to the wonderful people who built AvaScan, and I don't know the actual answer. So anything, I would really want it to be incredibly high. The higher that is for you, the person doing the delegation, the much better it is for the rest of the network. So you should demand high success rate from delegations, and as a result, we will all get an even more reliable network. So yeah, I think this is a fantastic question, Chris. And it's only now that I realize that we are not tracking this. At least I'm not tracking it. There might be people that work with me who are tracking it. Let me try and find out the answers for the future. And if we don't have it available, then I will ask people to collect this data. Okay, I am live. Yes, I was live. I didn't realize I was looking at the wrong screen there. Good morning indeed. Good afternoon, actually, for where you are. It's 1:30 where I am. What's my vision for Avalanche in 5 years as an ecosystem? In 5 years, Avalanche wants to be. I'm working really hard to make Avalanche one of the top 3 ecosystems. That's the vision. What does it take to get there? It takes a system that can absorb growth, that can respond to the demands of the applications built on top. Do we have that system? In spades. Absolutely in spades. We're one of the very, very few blockchains that isn't a single chain. We support multiple chains. Those multiple chains operate with different rules. They can all operate with different virtual machines. So you can actually have all sorts of different subnets on top of Avalanche that communicate with each other, but every single instance of that of these chains, every single subnet can operate with its own rules. And so that means that you can have compliant asset offerings. That means that you can have each application have its own chain. You can have every application that wants to can shield itself from congestion spikes, from fee activities of a single shared chain. Not that many people can say this. Ethereum 2 is nowhere near this. So this makes us, I think, one of the top contenders for the top position. It's going to be of course, often this question comes on the heels of, essentially questions about AVAX price, etc. I can't say anything about AVAX price. The whole space goes up and down, as you know, in tandem. So I don't know about any of those things, but I do know that we have the right architecture to absorb the growth that's coming in. There'll be temporary setbacks like FTX, but in general, there's a lot of activity coming into blockchains, thanks very much to the last few years of awareness building that we did as a space and interest that got built up by a whole bunch of other people who are outside the space. So there's going to be a lot of exciting applications coming in. We're primed, and in the very short term, we have to just kind of weather the scrutiny that the space is going to be getting, because as a result of activities of random people, grifters, con men, sociopaths, etc. But that has nothing to do with us. So we let that blow over, and we'll be here building. As you can see, we are here building even as we speak, and so I think we are going to be absorbing a lot of that growth, and as we move forwards. Mahov, hi, hello. All right, question. Can Avalanche add another chain VM to its primary network in addition to the C chain? Yes, there are already P, X, and C, and we could add any other chain. You're seeing a lot of buzz and marketing coming from Solana, Sui, and Aptos because of high capacity and TPS. This is not a good time to say anything about Solana because they're suffering, and we don't want to say anything about their TPS numbers, but I think many of you have heard me question them in the past. Those TPS numbers were doctored, as it turns out, were a bunch of other things. But anyway, so we'll leave that alone. Sui and Aptos are also these highly hyped coins. They were also highly sold to FTX, to Sam Bankman-Fried. So a lot of the hype was coming from the biggest hype maker in the space. So I don't know what's going to happen to these coins, but they certainly created hype in a way that we could not, right? So that, let's just face it, in some sense, our marketing wasn't as effective as these systems. But our technology is far better than theirs. Sui and Aptos are based on a consensus protocol that's designed by one of my students. His name is Ted Yin. Ted is a co-founder of Avalanche as well. He was a chief protocol architect at Avalanche. And he did all that work that went into Sui and Aptos over the summer, came back to Ithaca, said, hey, I'd like to work on something that's truly innovative, and went to work on Avalanche. So that's really the history there. The world doesn't need another virtual machine, right? If I go out there and I say, hey guys, wherever you are, like whoever, somebody on Wall Street, I have a new virtual machine for you. They'll just look at me like I came from a different planet. So Sui and Aptos, there's a reason why they're centered in Silicon Valley. It's a tech play. If you go to a bunch of techies in the Bay Area and you say, hey, I've got a new virtual machine, they will get excited for this technology's sake alone. But there is no real long-term value proposition in just another virtual machine. So anyhow, that's my take on this. Could we actually run a Move virtual machine which is the central thing underneath Sui and Aptos? Absolutely. I could create an M chain tomorrow if we wanted to. We could create a WASM chain tomorrow if we wanted to. Absolutely could. And again, I've mentioned on previous podcasts that we also already have a WASM chain prototype. So I actually touched it myself. We wrote this initial prototype for a virtual machine that executes WASM. So, it's just a slight bit more of engineering to turn that into a production level offering. But I don't think we're going to end up getting anything exciting out of that. So what are you going to get if you do that? The kinds of applications that are on these systems, Sui and Aptos have no applications. Nobody is chomping at the bit to try to move dApps. So I don't think I'll get anything out of those communities. They haven't even formed, and they already are facing an enormous obstacle throughout their formation in the shape of the SBF bankruptcy. They have a gazillion coins outstanding with SBF, and those coins will end up hitting the markets. It's just going to be a topsy-turvy world for them, I suspect, going forward. So, and then the Solana dApps, there isn't that much there also. There was supposed to be a big, complicated DeFi ecosystem in Solana, and it turned out that 11 of the big DeFi dApps were authored by one guy named Ian. He had 11 different entities, and he was pretending to be 11 different DeFi developers, but it was really just one guy. So, we could go through this, and we could take on the risk of launching another chain. But I don't know how well vetted those runtimes are, and I don't think that the value proposition is quite there. But since you asked the question, yes, it's absolutely possible. It's fairly straightforward to create another chain with another virtual machine. Let's see. Yeah. A while ago, I stated that NFTs can be used for more than just JPEGs, and that my team was working on something regarding this. Absolutely. Ravindra, I can talk a little bit about it, but not really all that much. But here is the observation. Many years ago, back when Ava Labs was first founded, this was, 3 years ago or so. And prior to 3 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, prior to founding Ava Labs, I had this vision way before NFTs were a thing, that we would have these cards, so to speak, that you can carry with you in your wallet that contain some opaque objects inside, and that these opaque objects that belong to you are actually credentials. So think of an NFT as kind of like an ID card, and the opaque credential is something that you can flash at someone and say, hey, I'm a US citizen, or hey, I'm a resident of the state of New York, or hey, someone has said that I'm a very valuable community member for this group of people. And as a result of possessing these things, these credentials, then other people can provide special treatment or deserving treatment for you, whatever that might be. So that's really the vision. It's fairly straightforward. There's a lot to be said about it. And everything that I go into depth on is going to go into this line of self-sovereign identities. So there are ways of doing this that are not very good, that put certain people in charge of issuing identities, and there are ways of doing this where the identity structure is actually self-sovereign. You create your own ID card, and you build up a system around it that works, that vets the statements that you have made. So I can go into more detail, maybe, but I don't want to, because we're the most copied from project. There is certainly a project out there that simply copies what we say. Like, they listen to this podcast. I'm sure there's at least one representative of that group in my audience today. They listen to us. They literally listen to any and every alpha leak, and then they try to do a quick stunt, rebranding anything we say, trying to jump ahead of us with cheap tricks and announcements to try to take wind out of our sails. So I don't want to go into too much detail here, and I'll just stop. There's a lot of cool stuff that we can build. Just wait up and you'll see. Is BTC.b similar to the Lightning Network? Maybe, but not really at all. So the Lightning Network is very different in how it operates. But it is a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin, right? So Lightning Network is a series of nodes that are connected in some complicated graph structure, and each and every one of the nodes follows a protocol, the Lightning protocol, for ferrying coins from one node to the other. And when it's time for somebody in some portion of the graph, let's say over here, to send some money to over here, they have to find a route that goes between them, and then the money is routed along those intermediaries to its ultimate destination. The Lightning Network reminds me of, I don't know if any of you read about early payment systems, but in some countries, especially in India, there's this system called the Hawala network. It's kind of like the Hawala network. So, I need to pay somebody in Bangalore, and it's hard to get money to Bangalore. So what I do is I call up my friend and I say, hey, Rohan, how are you doing today? Why don't I send you some money, and then you send your cousin some money, and then your cousin in Bangalore can pay my other friend, Ravindra, for example. So that's how the Lightning Network works. And it's a brilliant scheme in many ways, but it's also a fragile scheme in many ways. How is it fragile? The payments, for the payment to succeed, all of the intermediaries have to be online and active in the protocol at that instant when you are submitting your transaction. The Bitcoin network just relies on one miner being operational. If there's a single miner, the network is live. In a Lightning payment, all of the intermediaries without fail have to be online, and so that's a bit of a problem. Now, they're working on various different techniques for being able to route around failed nodes and so on. I'm referring to the initial version of this paper. I haven't followed everything, so if the Bitcoin maxis are going to get upset at me, don't. I'm referring to the initial Lightning network. I'm sure it's an evolving piece of art that constantly changes as we move along. So I'm not going to try to be super accurate with respect to the second, but that's how Lightning works. So that's why when there was this big launch in Italy that's using the Lightning network, a lot of people were complaining about transactions that did not make it, that did not succeed. That's kind of normal for it. The other problem with the Lightning network is its capacity is limited. I want to get some money to my friend Ravindra in Bangalore or what have you. Let's say I just made that up, but if my friend Rohan in let's say Boston, if he doesn't trust me for more than $1,000, then I can't get $10,000 to my friend Ravindra because my path has a bottleneck on it of $1,000. So those things really limit what the Lightning network can do. In contrast, once BTC is in the form of BTC.b, it's on the Avalanche network. Anybody holding that BTC can easily transmit it, can easily send it to any recipient on the Avalanche network in one step without having to construct a path, without having to have anybody along a certain path, etc. online. In fact, there's no notion of a path in Avalanche. They're just using Avalanche consensus to issue a standard Avalanche transaction. They can send BTC.b in exactly the same way that we all transact AVAX every day. So that's pretty nice. And as a result, it's fast, super fast. Failure modes are very simple compared to the Lightning Network. You don't fail because your money went to ABC but not D, C was dead, etc. So the user experience is much nicer because you don't have these silent failures inside the network, and its capacity is unlimited. So Lightning capacity is limited based on the paths, whereas Avalanche capacity is unlimited, exactly like the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin capacity is also unlimited. If you have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, you can easily transact it on the Bitcoin network. But if you had $1 billion worth of Bitcoin in the Lightning network, you guaranteed will not be able to send it all at once to your destination. The capacity of the Lightning network is only a few thousand Bitcoins. Okay, let's see. You wish it was 1 hour earlier. Okay, well, hello, and my apologies. This is the time that kind of works for me. I think it kind of works for a lot of audiences. I do understand that the Europeans are probably partying right now or having fun or whatnot. So, but this is the time that we could find. Let's see what else is there. Not when you go from a motorcycle to a Tesla. That's right. Once you've been in a Tesla and you're used to that speed, that's like an electric vehicle, or once you've been in the Formula E car, the red and white Avalanche Andretti car, which I have been in, but I haven't been able to drive it. You won't be able to go back to a regular car. That thing just is it's just itching to take off. Super fast. Okay. How well is the Avalanche bridge protected from malicious insiders trying to physically compromise the SGX chips and access the secrets? That's a great question. And there's a very simple answer. Even an insider will not and should not be able to launch the kind of attack you're worried about. A bridge node normally is a regular node. Okay, it runs on a regular CPU. And if somebody has super user access to it, then they can change what the bridge is doing. They can change the bridge code to get access to the internal secrets, and then they can issue any transaction that they want. The Avalanche bridges are constructed to use the SGX features. They don't execute on the regular part of the chip to which anybody who's super user could have access. Instead, the bridge code runs inside the code enclave. So what could somebody do? Suppose me. What could I do? Suppose I want to just go over to the Avalanche bridge right now and take all the money. Well, I could go there and I could hack the code. I could change the bridge code. It's definitely something I could do. It's sitting on disk. I turn the bridge off. I change the bridge code. I turn the bridge back on. I send a message on the internal Slack channels. I say, guys, we had an outage. Sorry, not so sorry, whatever. And I try to act cool. And I'm going to do a Superman 3 kind of an attack on this thing. If I were to do that, when the bridge comes up, the enclave is subject to this process known as attestation. The wardens that are built around the bridge nodes, they all engage in a complicated cryptographic protocol to see exactly which code got loaded onto the enclave. And so that code, if I hacked it, would look different, would have a different signature, would have a different hash. So as a result, if I were to change the code while the system is down, or I'll get to what happens when the system is up, if you like. If I were to do this attack that I just outlined, as the system comes up, the wardens would simply say, this is not the bridge we know to be the bridge. This is not the hash we want from the bridge, and therefore we will not provide to it any of our partially signed signatures that correspond to the bridge secret, and therefore the bridge will not be able to have any access to the secrets that guard the coins inside the bridge. So that kind of an attack would be thwarted. There are many other kinds of attacks. Once code is in the enclave, if I were to connect to it on the same machine, I can run whatever I want on the machine, but I cannot molest the code. I cannot change its internal instruction stream. It's just prohibited by the SGX enclave features. I could try to read memory from this. I could try to go and say, hey, this bridge is holding a secret somewhere in its memory. Let me go discover where that is. Well, every single cache line, every single chunk of memory is encrypted. So even if I were to become super user, I don't actually have access to this machine, just so you know. But if I were to have super user access, and if I were to connect, and if I were side by side with the enclave, and I tried to observe contents of memory, I would not be able to. Another thing you might think I could do, I could attach wires and stuff to the chip so that I could observe the communications between chip and memory. And maybe when it's storing my balances, I would simultaneously send transactions myself, and the bridge would have to do updates to its balances. And when that's happening, I might want to sort of do an attack where I change what's being stored as my account balance. That too wouldn't work because all of that communication that's outside of the enclave is fully encrypted. And I can enumerate all of these attacks, or you could, And rest assured that that these trusted execution technologies are built exactly to thwart all of them. And one of the reasons I sleep much better now that we switched to this new bridge, we used to be using an old conventional bridge. And it was one of the most fragile, flaky, dangerous pieces of code. And it left me with nothing but a constant heartache and constant anxiety. And that was one of the main reasons for why we developed this new code. And I feel so much better knowing that even if we had an insider trying to attack this thing, they would not be able to succeed. All right, let's see. It's, to my understanding, in the case of private keys, if only 3 wardens are compromised, then the entirety of the funds. No, that's not true. It's changed. The wardens and or the bridge nodes, they have to do a whole bunch of things. They have to do a couple of things actually. But whatever you do, you definitely are going to need to connect your software to the rest of the world. So I just alluded to these nice features provided by the Enclave. And where you put code in there, it's unmolestable. The code operates with confidentiality. Its data is not readable. It's all encrypted if you're outside the Enclave. So given how these things operate, so you have this nice box. It's very similar for those of you who worked in the financial services industry. It's very similar to hardware security modules. So banks use these devices that essentially are sealed computers, and they keep some kind of some cryptographic keys inside. So our bridge is essentially using the same technology, but instead of this giant box, a physical box that somebody packaged for you, etc., you're using a tiny miniature version that's in silicon on chip. So it's far more secure than those physical boxes. Okay, but no matter what you do, this thing does need to communicate with the world at large. And it needs to read the most recent version of the Bitcoin, say, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain. So for that, you need some intermediaries to interact with the outside world. You need some intermediaries who will give you the entirety of the chain. Think of the bridge as a client of the Bitcoin blockchain. So for this purpose, for the purpose of connecting the bridge to the outside world, we rely on these bridge nodes. And it's essentially something like, I think there are 8 of them, and we require, I think, 6 of them to say the same thing. So you'd have to compromise 6 out of 8. And you would then have to launch a fairly complicated attack where you get that 6 out of 8 to lie about what they saw on the Bitcoin blockchain. You might have to very well construct a whole bunch of blocks and keep those guys from reporting the real blockchain, but instead report your fake blockchain. So that is an issue. But there is a point here that the security guarantees of anything that's bridged is not identical to the security guarantees of things that are not bridged. That's true, and people should be aware of that difference. So that's true for any asset. We're not directly using Bitcoin because we can't. Bitcoin is not designed for facilitating this kind of usage. Do you have a bridge marketing strategy to leave the Lightning Network in the dust? No, we're not trying to compete with LN. LN does LN, and competing against it would be, I think, kind of futile. Nobody's using it, and there's no point in trying to leave it in the dust. Like we just have a new asset. Lightning is great for payments. They're designed for that use case. They should use it for that, and it's okay. We're more targeting the DeFi case. It just so happens that you can transact with us much faster also, but it's not something that, I mean, these social fights just simply, just create enemies for no reason, and that's not it's not a fight that I think is worth having. What was Princeton like? Oh, that's a hard question. I loved it, and it was I found it very annoying and very, very conservative. Tips for getting admitted. Work your butt off and do a lot of extracurricular activities. It's just the usual stuff. I have a bunch of tips for getting admitted to Cornell. Cornell does something different than Princeton. the nice thing about Cornell is that every single admission decision is made by a professor plus a staff member. At many other schools, it's just staff people, admission staff that let you in. They have certain biases, and if you know how to work it, then you win. Cornell is very nice in the sense that there's always a faculty member there present to read all of the essays. 1 year I served on that committee. I read a lot of essays from the Chicago, Detroit, and that Midwestern region. If you got into Cornell from that region that year, I might have seen your application. So hello to you, congrats. If you were rejected, then please don't get upset at me. There were some fantastic candidates instead. There's a lot to be said. These schools are hard to get into. There's a fair bit of element of luck in all of this, of course. And I mostly also got lucky throughout my career as well. Okay, I'm losing my voice, guys, and it's getting a little late. So USDC bins are looking good on Trader Joe. That's good to hear. This thing is going to scroll on me. Okay, so let's see. Lots of roles being filled. Identity solution for Web3. Any news on that front? Yep, we have news on that front. It's going to be great. It's a lot of excitement in that whole space in general. I think these issues are going to be addressed. So let's see. There are a bunch of questions here. I'm trying not to take multiple questions from the same people. Right. Okay. Yeah, this is a good point. Like, there were lots of failures in DeFi and CeFi. Hopefully, everybody has their wits about them. These kinds of things happen. They happen in every field. This was pretty brazen, it looks like, and I think people are now beginning to understand just how greedy this one person was, and what kind of an engine they built, and how brazen they are. If I understand correctly, any interchain communication protocol will eventually slow down all interconnected networks. This phenomenon was described as Distributed Systems 101 by Kevin Seknicki. Well, I don't know if that's Distributed Systems 101, but it's certainly true that the more communication you have, the more complexity you have, and the longer it takes to communicate. Will subnet communication slow down the whole Avalanche network? No. We designed the architecture of the system so that communication doesn't go through a central bottleneck. There are systems out there. There are very few systems that have a similar architecture to ours. There are two others. And one of them uses a centralized location for all communication. And so they built in this bottleneck. And partly they built it because of economic concerns. They're trying to extricate fees from all interchain communication. We decided not to go that route. You can two subnets can communicate among each other without bothering any other set of other subnets. So it's exactly, we patterned it after the internet, whereas many other people ended up patterning it after local area networks, kind of like data link networks, if that makes any sense to you. They created star patterns, and if you have a star, you're limited by the capacity of the node in the middle, or the chain in the middle in this case. So I'm really losing my voice. I'm going to kind of stop, I think. This is, quantum computing. How will QC affect Avalanche in particular? Let me answer that question and then call it a day, because I'm getting tired and my voice is gone. So QC, it's something that I'm not very worried about, but also it's something that I'm very worried about all at the same time. Let me explain why. First of all, if quantum computing were to pass, it's not like suddenly the world goes haywire and things that were infeasible suddenly become immediately feasible. Okay? Certain things get broken, but many others stay. Hashing stays fine, okay? But ECDSA signatures can get broken. Okay, so that means that, what does that mean? That your funds on Avalanche would be lost? Absolutely not. Your funds on the exchange, for example, will just stay where they are, and because they are really stored under the hash of an address, right? Under the UTXO identifier. And the attacker would have a tiny window of attack between you submitting a transaction that spends that UTXO, which reveals the public key, to break the public key and transmit another transaction that steals the funds. And so they would have about a second to break that. So we are incredibly safe in that, even if QC, like suddenly there's an announcement tomorrow that says, hey, I invented a quantum computer with 2,000 qubits, et cetera, then Avalanche would be one of the least affected chains out there already. So that's point number one. Point number two, we already worked on a lattice cryptography-based signature framework for Avalanche, and we have it ready just for this eventuality. So at some point, somebody will announce something, and when they do, we'll be like, okay, well, it seems like they'll announce something like whatever, 50 qubits. So we'll be like, okay, it's getting to be kind of uncomfortable, 50 qubits, and then you break the factorization in like a week or so, whatever it is that they announce. In response, we can just roll out that patch that says, hey, from here on out, the signatures are not based on ECDSA, but we will instead use lattices. We don't make this default right now because it ends up costing us about 10x more in storage. Your chain data would grow at about 10,000. At about 2,000 bytes per transaction, as opposed to 200 or so. So, do we want to pay that cost? Not really. There's no need. Why pay that 10x storage cost when clearly quantum computers are still pretty far away? So I'm not the least bit concerned. I hope you're not the least bit concerned. If you like, you could look into QC. There are new algorithms coming out every month, and some of the latest ones that they're standardizing on seem really promising. So go take a look. Maybe you can build your own subnet with all lattice-based cryptography or all something else that's also QC safe. So there is a lot you can do, and if you move your funds to your own subnet, you can do whatever you like on it, and it would be QC safe over there. So I hope that wraps up the discussion this week. I had a lot of fun thinking about cool questions, insightful questions, and trying to answer them on the fly as best as I can. And I hope I did an okay job. I don't think I did a great job today. My voice is going, and I'm kind of feeling tired. But I do hope that was fun for you as well. And as always, let's look to the future. There's a little bit of a garbage dumpster fire in our midst, started by some brazen person. Luckily, as I said, it doesn't affect us and our community much at all. And it created some long-standing imbalances, mispricings, etc. in the market. Whatever, it does that. It happens. It's normal. In the long term, those people who build the best communities, who build the best applications, who build the best technology will prevail. This is a technological race. And I hope you get a sense of the cool stuff that we're building all together as a community. Many of the things I talked about today are things that I get to learn about from other people who are outside Ava Labs, who are building. And I think I would say about half and half. Like a lot of the discussion was Trader Joe. That has nothing to do with us. So there's a lot of innovation going on in the Avalanche space, and I hope that you guys do remain engaged and are part of that ongoing discussion. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.